Yay. There we go. Okay, I'm actually going to move this over here and I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. There we go. Okay, I am going to send us live now.
I'm good.
Okie dokie. All right, let's start. We have started and people are starting to enter, which is amazing. Hi, Craig. It's nice to
How
see you.
I know starting off 2026 correctly, right?
Yeah, we're hopping in with a bang for show, for show. And thanks so much to the people who are early entrants and are joining us here. I'm gonna kind of dive us in a little bit just to do some intros while we wait for some other folks to join. I know that I am always inherently late by about 2 minutes, so I'm gonna give people some of that too. So welcome to this lovely presentation on how to transform your CX metrics into an executive level story and to help earn yourself budget at the C level. By the end of this, you'll have a simple way to turn CX metrics into an exec ready story that wins investments. You will also have a template that I built in Gamma that you can take away and use for examples, or you can even modify it yourself if you want to make a copy. And Craig has also prepared a ton of slides in typical Stoss fashion that you can use as examples in your own journey as well. I would love, Craig, for you to introduce yourself, if you don't
Yeah,
mind, for those
absolutely.
that
Hey
don't
everyone.
know you.
For those that don't know me, yeah, there's seems like every day it's fewer and far between. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Mercer, and love working partnering with Boulder for these types of things. My name is Craig Stoss. I currently am the VP of Solutions at a company called Codif. We provide AI software and agents to e-commerce companies. My background, I mean, has just been in customer facing for the past 20 plus years. Consulting. I ran teenage computer camps back in the late 90s. I taught senior citizens how to use the internet. And I've consulted with Fortune 500 companies, and then over the past several years, with a really big focus on solutions and software in general, and how you implement and deliver value on it. I think that's why this topic speaks to me a lot because a lot of the people I talk with are saying, well, why should I get a solution, whether it be an AI solution or whether it be any sort of tool for support teams or CX teams? And so this is something that I deal with every day, and I'm really excited to dive in with everyone on some examples and talk about how we get that budget as a CX team because we know strings are tight.
Strings are tight. I'm so excited to work on this with you specifically because, when we started kind of banding about the idea, I was like, do you think Codif has any good examples of like that we could use in this presentation? You were like, oh my God, yeah, we've got tons. So I'm stoked to see some of those. Obviously, I've already seen them because you've shared them with me, but I'm stoked to share them with everybody else. My name is Mercer. For those of you that don't know me, I am the Senior Director of CX Strategy and Solutions here at Boulder. I also just recently launched our customer success team, which we now have two customer success team members, and I'm super stoked. Um, yeah, and Boulder is a for good CX solution provider in the BPO space. So we do AI implementations with businesses like Craig's, Codif. We also do QA, we do workforce management, we do staffing in the CX space, and we also have an EOR business, which is employee of record. So for people who really want to have compliance in teams that are outside of CX, we will do all of that as well. Awesome. And I just want to shout out that Craig and I worked together in the past at another BPO, and there's actually a few alumni of that business as well here in the attendee list. So really nice to see you, Taylor. Really nice to see you, Ellie. And yeah, stoked to move onwards and upwards into this chitter chat. We like to keep things pretty casual here with these master classes. So please feel free to drop a message in the chat if you can, saying where you're from, where you're at emotionally, whatever is calling to you in this moment. Please also drop questions as you have them or thoughts as you have them. I will have my eye on the chat. I know that Craig will as well because he and I are old hat at doing the webinar game. All right, let's get into it, Craig. So when teams do get executive buy-in, and when you have gotten executive buy-in in the past, what is different about how you have told that story?
I think the biggest difference is the way you approach the problem. I as a leader, I get people proposing stuff to me all the time as I have to propose to my executives. And something that I've always said is start with the problem. When you start with a solution, um, it's just unclear what you're trying to solve, why you're trying to solve, why I even care that you want to solve it, why I need to be involved to solve it, and why that should even cost money and time, right? So I think that the first thing is always, as much as possible, quantify the problem in a way that executives can understand. And I think that's the other key point when it talks about understanding. I don't think most C-level employees, I don't think most VPs wake up thinking and being like, oh, I wonder what CSAT is today, or is my handle time gone down? They don't think the way about the things that we do. And so what we need to do is sit here and say, there is a risk to this business. We are carrying risk in some way due to a problem. Or maybe it's something on the positive side, like we are missing a growth opportunity. We're leaving money on the table because of something. That's what they're caring about. And so if you start your problem off in framing the problem in that type of way, you're going to have much more success, in my opinion. Because you're talking to them in a way that they think, not about, hey, I need to buy a piece of software and give me the budget. That's not where to start the conversation.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, anyone who's heard me talk about this knows that this is kind of the way I usually frame it, but like it's speaking the same language, right? Like as you said, they don't wake up thinking about AHT, CSAT, FCR, et cetera. What they do think about, as you touched on, is like risk reduction, cost leverage, revenue protection, and growth of that revenue, and that kind of thing. And so, being able to translate your metrics into what it means in that language lends you more efficacy in making the argument for what you need, right? Like, because if you go in and assume that they speak the same language as you never know what you're going to get back. It's like going into a restaurant in France and speaking English, assuming that they understand English, and then being upset when you get like something that you did not order and did not want and did not expect back, right? Like if you are not making the effort to speak the same language and ensure that they understand what you're trying to convey, you are not guaranteed to get what you want back. And the same goes when you're just like dropping a slide of customer experience metrics and assuming that they follow or understand any of the implications behind it, because
Yeah.
oftentimes they don't follow the trends, right?
Well, and I think that actually speaks to a second point that I had made, which is information isn't a request. So I could present all sorts of information. CSAT dropped last month. Customers complained about this UI feature in your software. The service was down for 1 hour, 2 weeks ago because of a power outage. That's informational. That's not described. Those all have problems. Those all have root causes. And so when you're talking to the executive level, especially when you're asking for time, money, people, whatever combination of those things, software, it doesn't matter. It's really to talk about directional. If we invest X now, whatever that is, X, we move a risk, we remove a risk, we change we change the company in this way. We take something that is causing pain and make it less painful or remove it entirely. That's a directional statement, and that's a way of using the information that you have, and maybe that goes into an addendum to your conversation. Maybe there's like a, hey, if you need more information, here's the nice charts and pretty information. But that's not, again, that's not the headline. The headline is not CSAT is dropped. The headline is, how do I want to change the company to avoid a risk caused by CSAT dropping that I've identified?
And what is that risk? Because
Sure.
I've learned that educating your executive team or board or whatever is ultimately the best way to get what you need, because if they understand and can speak to the why behind it and are brought along on that journey with a recommendation and education, it's going to be much stronger when they need to bring that back to like their SLT meeting and say like, hey, so and so wants this and this is why. Because inevitably they're going to have a conversation with the other executives who are going to say, well, if they want that, then we're going to need to pull spend from this. The person who's making the argument at the executive level needs to have your backing and education in order to sound competent and intelligent and feel confident to share that message. Visca in the chat said, focus on the ROI plus risk, question mark. And I'm wondering what you think about that, Craig.
I don't have the chat open, but yeah. So I think ROI is a later conversation, right? I feel like you have to get to the ROI at some point, but it starts out with, why are we even having this conversation, right? And because there's ROI coming in from all different directions, right? The margins. I mean, BPOs are a great example of this, right? Because you might be selling certain services and they have different margins. You might be selling through partnership software packages and those have certain margins. And you have all these different things that you do, line items, that SKUs that have different margins. So there's ROI coming in from every decision that's ever made. I think it's more of, when you start these conversations, you can express risk as a function of lost revenue or revenue that could be gained. But I don't think that's the way to open up the conversation. You could, because in order to understand ROI, you have to understand the I, right? And that's essentially what you're saying when there's a risk. You're saying, in order to solve this risk, I need investment, dot, 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 dot. Here's the return on that investment. So I would kind of reverse I would say, again, I don't know the exact question, but I would say risk first, then ROI at the end.
Yeah, this is part of the framework I think that we are working through. I'm going to share one slide here. I think you're also, okay, I was going to say, I think you're also going to see all of my tabs. So please don't judge me for my tabs. Does everyone see that? Great. So, I think there are like 6 different pieces to each of these slides that I would recommend folks considering using, right? So we've got a headline, which is that executive summary piece. It says what changed and why it matters. We've got the so what, which includes your business impact in executive language. It's that CX scorecard there. We've got the evidence. So 3 proof points max, I'd say, that bring the minimum metrics that support your claim, i.e. your headline. Then you've got your drivers, what caused it. This could be operational, it could be product and process. Then the decision and ask. So what do you want leadership to do? What are you saying that they should change based on these things? And then also talking through the risks and trade-offs. So if nothing changes, what's the impact of that going to be, right? So everything that Craig and I talk through in the next, 30, 40 minutes is going to be around these points, right? And around this framework. And so to the point, Craig, of like, what should you lead with? I think the argument is that you lead with that decision or risk or growth lever, and then you kind of unpack the why behind it. I'm curious,
Yeah.
what do you think?
No, I think that's exactly it. And I think the other thing that comes to the start is exactly that. Here's the decision that we need to make, and the risk that we're trying to avoid or mitigate. Whatever framing is in that area. but the other thing is that there's a realism here. This is not a cheerleading session, right? And so I think your layout kind of explains that, right? You're not going in here being like, I'm optimistic, oh, we're going to save that, thousands and thousands of dollars. We're not, we're this is a realistic approach of, hey, if we don't fix this, this is what's going to happen at current status quo. Like you're not even kind of talking, a quarter, whatever, a year down the road. You're assessing today. You're saying there's something wrong today. There's a problem today, and here's the consequence of us not even looking at it. And that's, I think, very important in the key drivers and the business outcomes, because you're sitting there, if you start just, I don't want to say making up numbers, but if you start with all this optimism of this massive change and how that we're going to live in a utopia in 6 months, if you just give me, money, you're going to miss the mark, because it's going to be seen as you just being enthusiastic about something versus actually solving a given problem. I feel like that's also important when you're going through this is to always be realistic. You can be enthusiastic about a project, but that's not going to get you the money. Your enthusiasm for a project is not a deciding factor for an executive. It is, what does this do to my business?
Yeah, 100%. I hope that the way that I'm sharing this is good for everyone. If you have thoughts on how you'd like it to be shared, or if you'd like it to be bigger, let me know. I also will drop a link to this presentation at the end, and we'll include it in follow-ups. I agree. I know that I have this tendency to provide like as much information as possible, because again, I feel like I want to educate them and I want them to understand and I want them to be able to speak to it competently. But I think it's important to remove all of the extra noise, right? Because all of the extra bits that we think is compelling and we think like contributes to the narrative might not actually make sense, right? And so the less the better, I think, on these slides that you're presenting, or your document or anything like that, because you don't want to overwhelm and you want to make sure that the key points are salient and easy to understand.
Yeah.
And along with that, I also think it's really important to have a clear ask. So going into your presentation knowing, this is what I want, this is what it'll do for us, what do you think,
Yeah.
is incredibly powerful. You can get that alignment on the call or in the document as you're going through, rather than having to wait, or them not necessarily having a full understanding on what you're asking for.
Yeah. This might be a good time for me to bring up my
Yeah.
oh, I don't have permission to share. Can you give me permission to share?
Yes,
Um,
I'm allowing you to do that now.
okay, perfect. So I think that and this might not fall into the less is more category that Mercer just mentioned, but um this is an example, this is a kind of a use case I deal with every day. The numbers are a little bit mocked up just for the purposes of making it easier to read. And sharp eye people will notice that this should say per month, not per year, but that's fine. But here's something that I think is really clear, right? Here's our baseline. You're showing this to executive, you're saying that here's where we're at today. I have 9 agents, 5 onshore, four with Boulder right now, and they're handling on average this much volume per month, of course, which is a constraint. And we get a lot, roughly 60%, repetitive macro-based questions, and 40% more complex questions that require us to do something. Um, that's really clear. Like that summarizes a support business in 3 lines of text. And you're going in here and you're saying, I want to buy AI software. I want to buy some sort of AI agent for my company. And so then you're going in here and saying, listen, what we're trying to do here is, the software is going to cost us $35,000 a year, and that's 24/7. That's going to cover some amount of volume. We'll talk about that in another slide. And also what this is going to do is going to give us the ability to promote people. We're going to have someone to manage this AI. We don't have to hire extra people. We might have to give them a little bit more money. But we can, we'll show you what that cost looks like. And we're going to have some more enablement, and we're going to be able to reduce the number of frontline agents, but increase our skill set capacity. The outsource, maybe we won't change that. Maybe there maybe some schedule changes, but in general, we're not going to change that. And then you see, this is the banger line, right? This is what Mercer was just talking about. I am asking for a plus 19% investment, right? This is the thing that's going to say, I am asking for this. We are not going to reduce headcount. We are removing a constraint on our ability to solve the growing volume. And I want a 19% investment, a plus 19% investment in order to buy this asset and upscale employees so that we can scale correctly. That's a really clear ask slide, right? And this is where I think that most people go, or most people need to start when they're talking to their executive team. Any thoughts, Mercer?
I love that. And I think like actually having the indicator of like how much of an investment it'll take and how much of a percentage that is above what you had before, I think is so important. And this is especially good if you're doing like some kind of pitch for something like a big ask. I think having the information like this is very important. I also love the comparison. Something that I think we don't use often enough when presenting is the before and after, right? I actually, in one of my example slides, did a similar thing, which was like, here are the risks that we're exposing ourselves to before we implement this change, and here's the after. And I think as long as you're tying it to a financial impact, it's really valuable. Yeah, I love this so much.
So the next thing that, oh, go ahead. Sorry,
No,
Mercer.
go ahead. You go ahead. No, please.
I was going to say, so the next thing is, okay, so I'm asking you for this investment, right? And now I'm going to tell you what you're going to get for that investment. And I think so that's where my description slide comes in. So the operational impact is that I'm going to clear the noise and remove a backlog threat because we know we're getting growing volume. And so using today, current state, again, very clear, using the numbers that I've given you, 60-40% split, you can see what this is going to do. You can see what AI is going to handle. You can see where the human elements come in. And you were going to say that this frees up human to focus on retention, complex cases. We can give more details about what we're solving around drowning from tickets, and talk about how we will use that excess capacity for higher value work in the AI management and enablement spaces, which could be another area of focus for your company, and be able to free up without hiring or without firing any headcount, which I think again is very crucial to executives. They want to understand what the downsides are, and obviously layoffs and anything like that can have a downside or an effect on the decision itself. So here again, very clear what's the immediate effect. And then I actually, to the question that was asked earlier, I think the next slide, because this I think is a bit of a boring slide, but the next slide is the ROI slide, right? This is the financial leverage. I'm going to show you that over the next year, we're expecting a 1.7x scale in tickets. We're expecting to grow that fast. That's a number probably given to you by the executive you're talking to. Like this is our corporate direction that we want to scale 1.7x. So you're extrapolating that out, and you're showing that, yeah, there's going to be, day one, there's going to be a little bit of a cost per ticket increase, something that's obviously not good. But once we achieve the company goal, we're actually going to save a hell of a lot of money per ticket, 30% per discount compared to hiring people to do this. So we are going to save 30% on what it would cost to cover this load in today's model. We are adjusting a model, and this is the solution that I'm proposing. So again, this is kind of like the CFO view. This is the ROI view that we talked about, and now it's a matter of, do you see that value, and can we execute on this?
The thing that I love so much about these slides, Craig, is that we both made slides and they're so different in their approach, but also so effective. And like these scream Stoss to me, like I've been presented to by you so many times. And I love that you brought them because I know that genuinely this is how your brain works. And so I love that. Like, I think that this is incredibly important and valuable. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to put it together. I also want to apologize if y'all can hear my son in the background. He is homesick today, and so my partner is taking care of him downstairs, and it sounds like it's nap time. So I just want to address the elephant in the room if anyone hears my son.
I just saw a question from Jared that I'll address, and then I'll stop sharing, and we can continue on with some of the talking points. But
Perfect.
Jared asks, do you recommend specific ask versus three options? I personally like specific ask. I think the specific ask, it makes it clearer. It becomes less of a discussion and more of, do you agree or disagree, right? I used to tell, I had an employee on one of my teams in India that I had years ago. Wonderful guy. I love this guy, great leader. But he would always, I always said to him, you need to get agreement that the problem actually exists. Because if the problem doesn't actually exist, and the person you're talking to doesn't agree that the problem exists, then the conversation is over before you even start it. Because like you need to frame the problem in a way that it's like, you need to understand this exists. Do you agree with me? And if you don't, then you stop the conversation. And that's why I kind of like the specific ask, because if I go, I think this problem exists, and here's three options, then it becomes this discussion of, well, which is the best option and why, it drowns out the message, right? It drowns out the urgency that you're probably trying to convey if you're actively seeking investment. Now, the one exception to this is, and this was a company I was at a few years ago, they had this really interesting way of doing budgeting for a year, something like what you have on the screen. They asked every leader to prepare three budgets. A keep the lights on budget, like this is the bare minimum. If the money goes below this, my team can't function. A ideal scenario budget, which is kind of like a normal growth, like well, the company's going to grow 1.7 times. That means I need X, people, I need X software, whatever. And then a utopia view, which is like if you had unlimited money, if you had investment, what would you do with it, and how much would that look like? Like, what would that be? And I actually really liked that because what that allowed you to do was to explore different options, right? Because you were able to say, listen, I can bare bones it here, but like you cannot cut more than that if the company had to for whatever reason. And then the other two were this really cool experiment in where would I invest my money if I had unlimited money? And that, because that's not a question that leaders are often asked. So there's one exception to that where I love that idea of every leader had to prepare these three levels of budget. But in general, I would say specific ask wins every time, in my opinion.
I mean, we can have a conversation about this because I obviously disagree. The answer that I gave to Jared in the chat is different.
Oh, did you? Oh my God, I didn't
I
know I
did.
disagreed with you.
It's okay. This is why it's good to have these conversations, right? Like you hear multiple different perspectives and you can kind of take what works for you and leave it. Yeah. So I'm going to go through one of the examples that I put together here, breaking down, kind of the importance of a CX scorecard. And I'm going to give an example of what a slide that could be presented that gives a scorecard is, and then how I would propose kind of rejiggering that scorecard a little bit. No night, buddy. Okay, so this is a typical before. So this is the set one of my slides. We will be sharing all of these slides after the fact. I will also share a gamma so that in the event that you want to make a copy of it and use the template that I have at the beginning, you can. And we'll include that. I'll drop it in the chat, and we'll also include it in the write-up after the fact. So this looks pretty typical to me. Like this is something that I have probably presented a few different times in my life over the past 20 years, right? We've got the top tags and how many tickets fit them. We've got channel breakdown for email, chat, and social, first response time, average handle time, volume, CSAT. we've got productivity, and then we've got some CSAT verbatims, right? Very good informationally. I think anyone who is a CX practitioner could probably see this and understand, like, dang, if our volume is maybe about 20K and 10% of that is billing, maybe we have a billing issue that we want to resolve, right? But your C level is going to look at this, and the thing that they're going to see is like, dang, why is social CSAT 79? Dang, shrinkage is 31%. What? Those are the things that they're going to see, and they're not going to understand what you're trying to tell them because there's no trending, right? There's no headline. They don't have any context for what any of this stuff means or if it's any different. There's too many things for them to see, and there's absolutely no understanding of how it impacts the business. So the way that I would propose to change this is you actually want to get an answer that says, are we healthy? And they can look at it in under a minute and understand, right? So this is how I would recommend rejiggering that information. Same thing, same information presented, different way to present it, right? We've got a headline. It says CX remains stable while demand rose. Response speed is now the constraint. We've got a scorecard that has 5 tiles maximum. I usually recommend customer sentiment. You can use CSAT, you can use NPS. I have feelings about CSAT, but this is not the soapbox for that. Speed, so you could do first response time, you could do time to resolution, whichever one is delivering more value for you. You could do quality, QA score, or recontact rate. Again, this is kind of unique to the business, depending on what you want to use or what you have access to. Efficiency, so I usually do either cost per contact or cost per ticket, and AHT, average handle time. Some tools don't have AHT in the way that we typically think about it, so just note that's a caveat. And then demand, right? So how often are people contacting you? What are the volume drivers? What kind of deflection are you seeing? So those are here. You'll also note that it says that it's up or down from the last month, and that you indicate what the target is. So they can see, is it above target? Is it below target? And why? In some of my other slides, you'll see I added drivers. This was kind of already a lot of information on a slide. We have the 3 reasons, drivers, behind these metrics. And then we have a proposed solution. The reason that I wanted to share this, Jared, is because we have 2 options that I'm proposing, right? So proposed solution, A, add temporary coverage, or B, fast track deflection content and macros. We also have information about if there's no action, what's going to happen. Resolution time will stay elevated. That will then cause higher recontacts and escalations. And then that has a retention risk in high value segments. If I wanted to make this even stronger, I could put the dollar number associated with that high value segment. I could say, in our high value segment, we have 6,000 customers and they're worth X amount of ARR or MRR, right? That immediately contextualizes in business language what the value of this problem is, right? And as I'm talking through the slides, I'd probably say, yeah, I think that we should add temporary coverage. That would be my recommendation. Here's the why behind it. And I would have some more slides breaking down like the fiscal impact of hiring the team members versus continuing to bleed out retention from our high value segments. Craig, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this, how you would have done it differently. I think it's important that we keep things stable. And so I like using the same kind of scorecard month over month because the executive team or the business team knows what to look for. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and if that changes your perspective on whether you would add multiple options or not.
So no, first off, that's a great scorecard, right? I think that scorecard stability is incredibly important. I think simple is also important. I if you have 20 metrics, there's no way to keep track of what you might need to keep track of those 20 metrics, but an executive is just like, what do I care about? What are my 3 metrics? There's a book called Traction, which I think I have back here on my shelf somewhere. that talks about the operating system for a business, and it talks about that, like having your kind of like two or three, I forget the exact number it gives, and it's like every leader in the company should know every other leader's top two, three metrics and be able to understand the impact of the business with what the levers are. Um, so I like that. I think the one change that I would make to what you displayed is, I mean, I can share my version of this because I put one together, but I think the biggest thing that I like is the traffic light system. Like put in, red. So this is essentially what you have. Like I think our slides are basically the same. Just mine has the traffic light system, but the actual underlying concept is exactly the same. And the reason why I like the traffic light system is this idea of it focuses attention. So what this if I looked at this from one of my leaders that reports to me, I would immediately know I have to ask questions about the 7-day recontact rate immediately without even reading the slide, without understanding what 14% meant, without understanding what the goal was. I can immediately say, I need to talk to you about this 14%. That's there's clearly a concern. And so that's, I think, the only change that I would make to it. Um, as it pertains to the multiple options, right? So I approach this a little bit differently than I think you did, because I took this as like, hey, I'm now presenting you, 1 year on as kind of like a review of, hey, I asked for this money, you gave me the money. Here's the success rate of it. Here's what happened. Um, I think that the way you approach it is probably more like a quarterly review or a monthly review type way. And what I like about that kind of distinction is in that view, you can kind of like start to highlight um, how the different options could have performed or would have changed things, at least in an estimated way. Um, and that to me is important, right? Because when you are going to go down the multiple option route, because I mean, it's impossible to predict these five metrics for three different options that two of which require more people than you have. It would just be too thumby. It would be too hand wavy. There would be no real logic to it. But you could start to understand which levers are necessary, and I think that's the key. Is that um, these scorecards should all be tied to a lever. So it's like what lever do I pull to change each of these things? And if you present those different options, it might be a different lever, right? Oh, I need, I want to up the human lever, I want to down the AI lever, I want to up the uh, business intelligence tool lever, whatever it is that you need. That should be clear from here too. And I think yours probably illustrates that more than mine. Mine was more of a scorecard from the a year in review.
I love this scorecard though, and I think I love how clear it is, like the trend, target, and the confidence, I think is really excellent. The what I also love the traffic light system too, and I think the only caution that I will give is that a lot of times people will use green to show that, like, oh, we're exceeding target, and red to show that we're below target. But if something doesn't need like an immediate change or doesn't have an immediate impact, I would recommend not doing that because people see red and they're like, oh no,
Yeah,
this is like an immediate change that needs to happen. This is something that, is really urgent. And so that's my only caution with
yeah,
color. Like the 7-day recontact rate, I do think should be red, right? But there are some people, sometimes I'll just see like up is red and down is green. And I think we just need
yeah.
to be really cognizant of that. It's not meant to be a decoration.
And one thing that I'll add to that is actually something that I didn't follow really well here. I mean, maybe driver was a little bit of this, but you and I have talked when we were working together, about my article around friction versus value. And one of the things that I specifically called out there was that these these charts aren't measuring customer experience. They're measuring operations. If you want to start comparing this to customer experience, you need to add in another dimension here, which is what is the customer feedback based on this, right? Yeah, 4.2 is below target, but are your customers complaining about something fundamentally different? Are they complaining at all? Right? That's important here. So you could say this is yellow and that's not meeting our standard, but that doesn't mean our customers are pissed off at us, right? And that is a very important distinction for CX leaders, at least. Executives care about the operations, which is, I think, what this chart really speaks to. And same with your scorecard. But if you're presenting this to a CX leadership group, I think there's the framing needs to be switched. And I mean, I know that's not the purpose of this particular masterclass, but I think that's an important distinction, because I would argue that you should be presenting slightly different slides to your audience, depending on your audience. And this, I would say, is definitely much more of an exec slide than a CX leader slide.
Absolutely. 100%. Cool. I just want to make sure that we are kind of still staying on track. There was one thing that we said we were going to do, which is help translating CX and ops data into business outcomes. The tagline here is metrics don't earn investment, outcomes do, right? So unless you are gifted with like a CEO or a CRO who really understands the metrics, they aren't going to care about your CSAT. And so showing a bunch of metrics is not going to have an impact. I think I have an example of this that I will share as well from my slides. So here's one that I made asking for additional headcount, right? I think, looking at this, you could be like, wow, that's really meaningful. That shows that volume has increased. And that obviously shows that we need more people, right? And then there's, agents are reporting feeling overwhelmed and stretched. Also, spoiler alert, this is pretty much like verbatim a slide that I've probably presented in like 2015 or 2016 or something like that, asking for headcount at Trello. Like agents are feeling tired. Backlog is really heavy. We're concerned about a decline in CSAT. Like none of these things are grounded in the business, and we are feeling the pain on the customer experience team, but that doesn't mean that anybody else cares about it, right? Especially if it's not contextualized. So I think in the past, and maybe even for like people starting out on their journey, they're like, oh, I've got a chart, I've got data. This is so meaningful. Like obviously this is going to do it for me. But no, because you haven't bought them in. If we look back on that executive story, like there's no headline here. There's no so what here. There's no meaningful metrics presented. And this chart is without any context, right? So the way that I would shift it, and this might look like a less powerful slide, but I think it's actually, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, Craig, more compelling to me now as an executive than the other one, right? So we've got the ask right at the start. Approving 3 temporary FTEs protects service reliability during peak demand, prevents avoidable cost and churn exposure. We've got the point about revenue protection and how much money it's actually protecting. We've got customer retention and the percentage of churn that it would prevent. And then we've got the team stability. And we talk about attrition there and what that means for other team members, including people in training and recruiters and all of that. So not only does it talk about the impact on CX, but it talks about the impact across the business. And I think for almost every metric in CX, you have the language to link it to other teams. And the more you can do that, the more you can create like a dense web and show that it does actually impact the rest of the business, the more likely it is that you're going to get buy-in. And obviously you're probably not like going to your executive team and asking for 3 temp full-time employees. That's not usually an executive level decision, but I wanted to take examples that pretty much everyone has familiarity with and show how you can move the narrative from very, very basic into something expanded and meaningful. So,
I mean, honestly, I want to say no notes, but I might make one note. I think the numbers probably should be bigger. Like I think that
100%.
I honestly, I mean, honestly, this is exactly, yeah, I love this. I love this slide. And I think that it explains very clearly the impacts. It gives metrics, like clear numbers. And it explains it very well. But yeah, honestly, no real notes other than the fact that I
Thank you.
love big, flashy, colorful things.
Gamma, it's the
It's
best.
my ADHD speaking.
They're one of our clients, and I love working with them every single day. Their product is amazing. If you are not using Gamma, I fully recommend it. They made all of these slides for me. It's very beautiful. I forgot that I'd made other slides too. This talks about the operational evidence of the issue. So if your leadership team is like, yep, okay, I'm bought in, like, but also I need to know why. So I have the language. Here are some of the things that are driving it, or the operational evidence, so the metrics that back it up, and the drivers. So what's causing the issue? And then we've got the ask. So here's my recommendation, and what I'll do to report on it, and then the risks and trade-offs, like we talked about, Jared. So yes, the number should probably be higher. I was literally just putting in bunk data because I wanted to have some kind of data. And you'll note when you look at the template, it's all in like lorem ipsum, so there's no actual data there for the template. But I hope that that was helpful.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
maybe the only thing I'll add to this idea of translating CX to business data, which is what your slides do really well, is um I think it's important there's 2 points, and one of them I actually talked to Chingiz, our CEO at Codif, just yesterday about. The budget conversations are trade-offs, not absolutes. Like there's no for most companies, if you're not Google's and IBM's and there's not just a bucket of money that people can just pick out of and be like, I want to spend some money today for a project. Um the so the conversation I had with Chingiz was really interesting because we have a few high level corporate goals, and some of those will cost money in hiring the right person or procuring software or maybe hiring a contractor, and um and we were just talking about like where do we spend that investment, because what's going to move the needle the most. And so I think that's also important to note, is that you're not competing for does CX get money or not get money. It's does CX get money over products, project they want to run, or over sales project that they want to run. And I think that by understanding that, um, it helps it helps um, mend some of the pain it gets if you're turned down, for example. Like it helps you understand that, like, listen, the thing that you care about, the thing that you're passionate about and want to do, just wasn't the top priority this month, this quarter, whatever it might be. And so um, I think that's important to understand. And then I think the second thing that I would add to what Mercer presented is, or at least in my observation, and I think this is fairly true, C-level and executives tend to fund things that are scale enablers, especially in startup land. They're if the goal is to scale, that is much more important than a quality improvement. And so some of our projects are quality, right? Like um you may want to improve the quality of something, whether it be an automation, whether it be some sort of training. Um, but if that's not going to fundamentally move the needle when the focus is on scaling, you're going to lose out. So why this relates to translating CX to ops is focus on those things. Say why this is an important thing that should be considered as an important trade-off, and say, why is this enabling scale? Why is this going to help us get more revenue and move that needle faster than something else? And again, making sure that those little data points that you use illustrate that fact.
yes, I love that. I actually just dropped a little like snippet example in the chat that I think you can use as a framework, or I sometimes use as a framework, which is like, if volume X is avoidable and this metric drops by this amount, that equals this fewer a number of contacts, which has this impact on money that either we can save like as a cost saving if that's something that your company is focused on, or that we can redeploy elsewhere, which is super duper important when those businesses are trying to scale. Because if you're saving money because you have less tickets and yada, 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 you can use that towards AI. You can use that towards hiring like a knowledge management individual. You can use that to implementing a co-pilot. Like there are numbers of ways that you can reinvest that too. And speaking to that and being able to verbalize it and show your plan for the future also, I think, earns you some Girl Scout points, Scout points, cookie points. I don't know. There's some phrase that I'm like, it's not here right now, but
Brownie points.
brownie points. There we go. Brownie points. You can earn some brownie points with your leadership team because it shows that you are being a good steward of the business as well.
Yeah.
Um, Cool. We are kind of getting down to the end, folks. So if you have any questions, I did want to again show like the little template that I had mentioned at the beginning, as well as some examples of how you can break down the pieces of information that I recommended. We do have some questions that were sent to us ahead of time, so we can also answer those if you do not have any. But Craig, before I get into that reusable exec deck, you had a really great point in our conversation about story continuity that I
Mm.
think is like a huge up level that would be great for this
Yeah.
audience.
I strongly believe this, and it's something that I teach every leader that reports to me. And the way I focus, the way I say it is that the last slide of your previous business review should be the start of your next business review. I think what happens is when you have disjointed uh, reviews, when you start from a different place or start with focusing on a different set of projects or initiatives in your business review, whether it be monthly, maybe it's one-on-ones, maybe it's monthly, quarterly, it doesn't matter. Any type of meeting where you're presenting to an executive or showing results to an executive, um, the disjointedness causes confusion because it's like, oh, you mentioned project one last week and now I don't, where's project one on the chart now, and oh, you promised me you were going to do this, did you do it? And so the way I always frame it is the last slide of whatever your business review is like, okay, I've just told you all the information, here's what I'm doing about it. And then in your next review, it's like, here's what I told you I was going to do about it. Here's what I did, and here's what became, here's why I had to pivot. And here's what's important this month, or here's what's important for the next quarterly, update, and then continue a fluid story that starts from where you left off, where you are, and then where are you going, and then loop. This is where we left off. This is where I am now. This is where I'm going. I think that continuity is just super important. It helps leaders stay in more in touch with what you're doing. And quite for me, as someone who has a horrible memory, it quite frankly helps me jog my memory on, oh, this is why I stopped doing this because I had to pivot because there was a critical situation that I had to come up with, or we had to we had a big someone quit that was a strategic person for this project, so we had to put it on hold. But whatever. But it helps me keep track of that, and I think that's something that I would recommend to everyone as well.
100%. I had never thought about that, but first off, I love the point about like this is a reminder for me too, like, oh shoot, I did commit to this, and why did I stop doing it, or like did it just fall off or whatever. So there's obviously some accountability there as well. But also maintaining continuity and bringing them along with you, right? Like bringing your viewer along with you, bringing the executive team along with you, and continuing the narrative, I think is really important. I dropped the link to the Gamma in the chat for anyone who was just waiting for that before dipping out. So if you want to just review that on your own, I think that might actually be a better use of your time than me walking through Laura Mipsum templates on a webinar. And I think we can probably just answer maybe like one or two questions, Craig, before we leave. I think I'm gonna pick one of these to ask, and then I would love you to pick one if you wouldn't mind. And if not, that's fine. I know I'm asking you this on the fly. But one of the questions that we got is how can you explain volume spikes to executives so that it doesn't just sound like you're making an excuse?
I mean,
Oh,
actually explain it. I mean, I think the problem is we think that volume spike is self-explanatory. Volume spikes happen for a reason. In the software world, that could be because we released a bad patch. In the physical device world, it could be because there was a recall, like a safety recall. In the retail world, it could be because we launched a promo code for Labor Day weekend only. Like spikes happen for a reason, and I think that again, as CX leaders, if I said to Mercer as a seasoned CX leader, volume spiked, she would know what that means. She would know the implications of that. She would know the stress that I'm under to make it, to make sure it's resolved. Execs don't understand that. So you explain it to them. Well, the volume spiked because, and actually explain it. That's my answer to that one.
yeah, I mean, I think it also, you need to have the data, right? Like you
Yep.
need to
Yes.
have some kind of data tracking in your system already. So if you do not have any kind of like data implementation in your help desk, I would say that that's probably the better place to start with this question because if you don't have an answer to why did the volume spike other than like, oh, well, busy season, busy season,
Yeah.
like that's not going to be meaningful to them and that will just sound like an excuse. Like, oh, sometimes
Yeah.
volume just spikes in September. Like, okay, you should have drivers, whether that be like tags or customer segments or stuff like that. I think is instrumentation is the word I'm looking for. You need to have instrumentation in your help desk to be able to report on it.
Um, I like the question that what helps build or destroy trust in a CX scorecard? I like that question that was sent to us.
That's a
What do you think?
hard question. That is a hard question. I think so. I am of the opinion that like anyone can manipulate data to tell any story that they want, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as I sniff that, like even a little bit in a presentation, I I my brain instantly like puts up walls. And this has happened before with team members for me that'll come and show me these metrics or like this really wild improvement and not have any kind of explanation as to why or what they changed or anything like that. And I'm like, okay, so we're just like reporting different metrics and telling a different story now. Like, is that what we're doing? And so I think, and again, it's like you keep the scorecard the same month over month, and I think that's helpful. And as soon as someone like switches something, if they don't have an answer for like why they did that and what the message that they're trying to convey is, I am distrustful.
Yeah.
I see you smiling,
There,
so I'm curious what you
no,
think
I'm
about that.
smiling because you actually sparked a memory of mine when you said that sniffing out the using data to your advantage. But so I great answer. I mean I'm a stats guy, so I think one thing that I am a stickler on for my teams is if you're going to give me a chart, you're going to tell me like it's going to have an x-axis, it's going to have a y-axis. It's going to tell me how that chart was calculated. When what's included in that chart, what's not included. Like that. It's super important to understand how that chart was generated and so when you say something like, oh, 3x improvement on something, okay, that's awesome, great job, but show me, how did you measure that? What was included? What was your baseline? And what did you do to it? The other thing that I like to ask, this is not one of the points I was going to make, is what did you do to impact that? Right? Because I've had sharp people come to me and say, "Oh, CSAT, went down by, a minute and a half last quarter." And be like, "Okay, did you do that?" Like I mean, is that just a quirk of statistics, right? I mean, that one, and that question catches people off guard because they often don't have an answer, right? It's a great example, but don't say that as a success metric. So anyway, that was a separate one. The example
Yeah.
I wanted to give is where there's disingenuous examples. And what I mean by that is anecdotal data that is like, oh, look, one customer wrote in and said how often they love this new feature, or they love our AI agent, or they love whatever. Well, that's not in any way representative of anything, right? Like, like that's one person that you're quoting. How do I don't know there's 10 quotes of people not liking that particular thing? But the example that came to mind when you said that was I once had a leader present to me. It was pros and cons for a budget ask. Like they were coming to me for some budget, and they literally had a chart. And I wish I had screenshotted it because it had pros and cons in a table of doing this of pros and cons of this project. And they had 10 pros, and the only con was is that our team would be more overworked if we didn't do it. That was the only con. And it was like, no, that's just completely disingenuous. You know what I mean? Like it was just not. It didn't resonate well at all, and it was like, you go and actually think, what is the negative impact of this type of thing? So
100%.
that's but yeah, that's yeah, no, nothing else to add to that one. Good
I
answer.
love that point. We are over time, so I'm not gonna belabor this, but my favorite anecdote around this is my son will sometimes ask me, is three a big number or a little number? And I'm like, three is a big number if it's three T-Rexes. It is a small number if it's like three pennies. So when someone's like, oh, we reduced it by 3x, okay, is that like from 9 to 3?
Yeah,
Or is it from like 3,000 to 1,000? Right. And
yeah,
same thing with the like, oh, we reduced handle time by a minute. Okay, did you reduce it from like 55 minutes to 54? Or are we doing like a 3 minute to like 2 minute reduction? Because the impact between those is significant. Anyway, that's more fun with data and rhetoric talk. Thank you everyone who has joined us. Thank you, Craig, so much for being just the best webinar companion that I could ever ask for. I'm glad that we've gotten to do this for so many years. Uh, Everyone, if you want to know more about AI, you can follow Craig on LinkedIn. He posts all the time about it. If you want vaguely unhinged thoughts about CX, you can follow me on LinkedIn. Also, Codif is really great for businesses looking to use AI. Boulder is really great if you're looking for ethical outsourcing or ethical EOR or just help with compliance. Please reach out to me if you want help with that. Just to recap in 3 lines, lead with the decision and business impact that you're trying to get buy-in for. Use a 5-tile scorecard with stable definitions month over month so no one is like, what's the lie here? And then make the update reusable so that the story compounds over time. Keep that continuity, to Craig's point. I will share the scorecard template and the 6-slide deck outline in our recap emails, though I also did it in the chat. I will also share Craig's slides, which I hope that he will send to me. And yeah, thank you so much. We're going to do another one of these in February with support driven. I don't know the topic yet. I'm still working on that, but keep an eye on either my LinkedIn or support driven's LinkedIn or Boulder's for updates and to follow along. Thank you so much, everyone. Jared, yes, I will send Craig's slides rather to you via email, or maybe he can do it in support driven or elevate or something like that. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day, and may
thanks
the
so
odds
much,
be
everyone.
ever in your budget favor. Bye.
Thanks, Mercer. Thanks, everyone.